Rim Ho Chol, he was awarded. What was the loveliest thing about this is that this piece of work was developed from a sketch. They were told to go to Steelworks. He's the only person who went outside the Steelworks and sketched from a not such an obtuse sort of perspective. His initial sketch was much lower down. This isn't a true perspective, as in that unless he was up a tree, he wouldn't be able to have made this. He actually took the initial sketch, so sized, from much more sort of ground level. But he was the only guy who had sort of taken it, if you like, had gone outside the sort of where everybody else had been. And we said to him, yeah, you develop that piece of work. It seemed to hit the sort of narrative that we were trying to get. And he developed his work, and because he developed his work, he was selected above. In Korea, normally the older artists would be said, you go to Australia, because you pay deference to the elder. In North Korea, comrade, in China, Tongzhe, but in North Korea it's Tongji and Dongmu. There's two levels of comrade. So there's one, often the Tongmu is for friends or also for females, because I'm afraid in Confucian, at the same time, females do tend to have a lesser role. In North Korea, they say that women sort of, it's not like in China, hold up half the sky, but they push half the cartwheel around. But I think they're sort of, it isn't as equal as perhaps one would think or would hope. But the beauty with this painting is, as he developed it, he painted it actually very quickly. A lot of people say, oh, this reminds me of such and such. If you see his sketch, it's actually not so similar to this style. A lot of people say Pissarro or Lowry or what have you, oh, he must have seen the chocolate box or this. I assure you, this man has seen nothing. He hasn't been out of the country, and stuff doesn't come in like that. And it's got a basis from his initial sketch. And what he did is he found this technique of having the snow by simply avoiding putting ink onto this pieces of paper. So the white snow is in fact, the actual paper. This is a handmade paper made in the studio from Dactree. And so it's a wonderful process. The initial sketch is done on a piece of paper, like just normal sketch paper, or photocopying paper, if you like. And the outline is then, so a same piece this size is drawn with the initial hard work. So it'll change slightly from the sketch, and this is where he developed it. And then a bit of carbon paper is put sandwiched between and then drawn onto this. So he works off a carbon line from this. There's very little pencil work on these pieces. But what there is a very slight, faint carbon line, or some people just trace a line so you get the edges of the line on it. And he worked very rapidly through it. There's the propaganda van, there's the band that's brought the bus. Every sort of big work unit has a band that'll play in the mornings. This will be on a 24-hour shift to keep the furnaces burning. And also of note in this picture, of course, here is similar to the award charts. This is basically what's going on. It'll have the newspapers in it, plus who's been awarded, etc. So again, it relates to the theme from that mosaic, but in a totally different style. And he's a lovely man. He said, well, I think I've done the best painting, and I want to go to Australia. And there was absolutely no sort of, what I thought you would be a sort of he wasn't, he definitely wanted to sort of boast, I think, in his way. The second piece is, in a lovely contrast, if you just had these two pieces side by side, in fact, scale-wise, it's very distinct. This is Cho Chang-ho. He's a merited artist. In North Korea, you start off, there's a sort of 6-7 years study at Pyongyang Art University. You then get either selected by one of the art studios, whether it be Mansudae Art Studio, which is the one we worked with, or there's Peko, Minier, etc., etc. If you don't get lucky enough to be picked because your level isn't good enough, you're probably heading off to the countryside to an art studio over there, and that artwork will probably be some form of propaganda painting, maybe painting on the big hoardings and what have you. So very difficult then to work your way back into this system. But he's now again interested in coming once again and doing sort of big industrial elements. I mean, there might be a reason, simply there was nothing going on in the industry for the last 20 years, but anyhow, that's for debate. But I think what's lovely here is this guy really knows his work. It's a beautiful use of ink, one brush, one stroke, and very, very hard, quick work, a very hard stroke, and you get incredible detail. If you look around the centre here, you sort of get drawn in. So we love the piece, and the number 9 chosen simply because 9 represents luck, as it does in China. So some things don't change. Im Hyok's piece was working from a photograph, and he found this very difficult, working from something so small. And but he never in Korea have they ever done an ink this size, so he was sort of challenged with this, and went through this whole process saying it's not working or it is working, what have you. I think to me it's delightful whether it's anatomically correct or not. The fact is, I used to work as a countryside ranger, and as I was sort of like cleaning out toilets and the whole lot. And if someone would come in along in a suit past you, would have this sort of look like, who the heck are you? And it's this sort of for the kids program, they say, look at the man and looking, he's wondering who you are. I don't think he's doing that. I think he's basically looking and thinking you're like a lot of rich, He has this enormous power in him. He's extremely proud of the work he's doing, and it was very clear when the photograph was taken that was true. He had no time for the photographer taking his, he'd just come off work, he's having a fag, photographer comes up and he's got that, get out of my space. And I think that's what's so strong with this. And this, you will not see work like this in North Korea, I promise you. The beauty of it is, again, he's left, the white again, he's left, it's not a painted on white, but the way he's sort of worked the smoke, both around the building and actually back off through, and these sort of strange strokes that appear from nowhere. And as soon as you've got a loaded brush, you place it, it's going to make a mark that is, you can't go over that. And I think that's what's so beautiful, seeing these people work. Sometimes they're like this, we place it, and then they place it, and it's gone. And I think actually, I love it. I think it's a very, very strong piece. The interior was a very, this week commission, we said we'd like to see an interior, and the very first one they gave us was a very similar design, but almost like a show home. It was shiny, it was as if no one had lived there. And the artist that we worked with eventually added his own touches. And I think you've got the wind coming through, and he almost treats this as a detective story. You can see that whoever sits here has been reading up, he's reading the Korea, the magazine about the site he works on. In the mirror are reflected books, which shows us that he's studying. They have an extra university at the steelworks. They have a university where you can study, like a college. He's obviously a sort of middle-aged man because his son's in the army and his daughter's just got married. And there's all this sort of little hints of reference, whether he's come back for lunch, a little bit late for lunch, so what is going on? Is it a day off or what have you? But he really got into this piece, and so much so that there were a few alterations. The wind he had initially wasn't picking up on the calendar, and the cigarette smoke was going directly up. So if you look at the smoke on this, it's actually repainted on. It's not using the white of the paper. So mistakes sometimes are sort of just worked through. But it's so unusual for someone. He said his attitude was, I've never had the opportunity to do anything like this. It's been quite interesting for me. And it's very much actually like a Korean workers' home. I've had the privilege, in one of the films we made, a State of Mind, following the girls in the mass games, the 100,000 strong socialist realism extravaganza. We followed two girls. We actually went to the home of people in the countryside. And this is basically a typical home. It would be, traditionally would have been a heated floor, this yellow vinyl, but there would have been heating, there's a sort of electrical heating when there is the electricity to heat that floor. And again with a sort of gate out and a sort of rather, I think it's like an A-level piece, this. I love that. I love it for that. The simplicity, the obvious hint towards the factory and the workers and just the way things are placed.